Dak Prescott finishing as a bottom 10 quarterback is very unlikely. There's a lot of bad quarterback play in the NFL right now, and Dak Prescott is right now is kind of like in the middle of the road, around there, if that. The issue with Dak Prescott is, he beats up on these good, on these bad teams, and he really inflates his numbers versus those bad teams, and his record versus teams above 500 aren't very good. And then when you see the record versus teams that are just very good, like the Niners, that changes drastically, and he really beats up on the bad teams. But the good teams, it seems like he really does struggle against the good teams, the good defenses mainly, and that's something a top 10 quarterback should have. They should be able to attack those top 10 defenses. You should still be able to get the job done. But Dak Prescott has not been able to do that. He's got the weapons. He's got CeeDee Lamb. He had Amari Cooper in the past. He's always had the weapons. He had Zeke in the backfield with him, a very good offensive line. There's absolutely no reason why he couldn't have been. Now, the coaching situation hasn't always been great. Wasn't a fan of Jason Garrett, and I'm really not a fan of the way McCarthy is calling the game. Not a fan of it whatsoever. But Dak Prescott being a bottom 10 quarterback, I'm gonna go hot on that one because he's still very talented. He's still a good quarterback. He could, run out the pocket. He could run for a couple of yards. He could beat up on those bad teams. Now, when he does play the really good teams, he does usually struggle. And, there's no reason why the Cowboys can't beat or at least keep games close against some of the best teams. They have a very talented football team. One of the most talented football teams in the NFL. Really, they have a lot of talent on defense. And, does the loss of Trayvon Diggs really make that much of a difference? It could, but that's not the reason why you lost. You only scored 15 points versus the Niners, and Dak Prescott threw 3 interceptions. So versus very good defenses, Dak Prescott just doesn't play very well, doesn't really get it done versus some, really good defenses. He really seems to struggle a bit, and there's no reason not to. He's always had a very good offensive line, great weapons, great offensive line most of the time. And, he also struggles with injuries. He also has some injury issues, but him being a bottom 10 quarterback is a little crazy. There's not a lot of good quarterback play right now. Just to name a few. Desmond Ridder is really bad. Bryce Young isn't playing his greatest ball. Zach Wilson, you could say he's been a little better, but not really. You could go on and on and on. There's quite a few quarterbacks that just don't play at a very high level, or, Dak Prescott plays a lot better than the bottom 10 quarterbacks. He does. Now, you may not like him. He may play bad versus really good defenses, but, he does really beat up bad defenses. And, once in a while, he has a good game against, a decent defense, a good defense, but it's not consistent enough. He's not consistent enough. And I've always defended him. I have always defended him with the interceptions, but there's, we're starting to get a point where if you're going to throw a lot of interceptions, you better be able to get your team back down that field and score some more points. That hasn't been fully the case. And if you look at the season so far, they've beat up on bad teams. And their red zone offense has been horrible. And I don't see why it shouldn't be. You have Tony Pollard, who's a big threat in the run game. Offensive line has been pretty good. You have really good weapons. There's no reason why. You have very talented and athletic, very few tight ends, and I really like Jake Ferguson, Luke Musgrave, Shoemaker. I always mix up the tight ends with the Packers and the Cowboys, and they're both rookies. I believe they have Shoemaker. So they have talented tight ends. They have talented weapons. So I don't see why Dak Prescott couldn't be much or playing much better than he is, or this offense is doing much better. I don't think it's all Dak Prescott. I think some of it and quite a bit of it has to do with coaching. Not a fan of the coaching. Mike McCarthy was a pretty good coach 15 years ago. Now, game has evolved and he has failed to evolve with the game. So I think it's definitely a coaching issue, but it's also a Dak Prescott issue. Throwing 3 interceptions, the coach isn't doing that. Struggling versus the really good teams that that can be a product of the coach. If you beat up on the really bad teams, once you play a really talented, an elite team like the Niners, you get mollywopped. You get your rear end handed to you on a silver platter. What was it, 38-14? It wasn't even close. It was pathetic. So I think coaching has a lot to do with it, with how the offense looks. I still think Dak Prescott is, I'm not going to say top 10. I'm going to say a top 12 quarterback. I still think he's absolutely a top 12 quarterback. Issue with that is, well, top 10 talent, there's just so many good quarterbacks right now. There's a lot of good quarterback play, but then there's, you know, kind of like the whole other end of the spectrum. Like, it's not like there's any in between. It's like it's either the quarterback's really good or really bad this year. That's the feeling I'm kind of getting. But Dak Prescott is one of those quarterbacks. He's one of those very few that are right in the middle, very mediocre. But Dak Prescott finishing as a bottom 10 QB is, I will say, I don't think that happens. I don't see it happening.